Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. This is Comprehensivist Wednesdays that we do in collaboration with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. Today is special. We're going to be talking about our favorite comprehensivist meetups of all times. Believe it or not, we've done 157 of them. So we can proceed one of two ways, and we will proceed both the ways because they all lead to the same place. One way is I'm inviting you to talk about your favorite meetups. The second way, in order to jog your memory, we're going to be going through the list of all our meetup videos for comprehensivist meetups. We have almost 1,000 meetups videos on 52 Living Ideas, and 157 of them, almost 16% of them, are comprehensivist videos. So we'll go through the list. Now, I'm going to cheat by using both the methods at the same time for the first video here. And that is going to be, let's look at the most popular video for the comprehensivist meetups. Okay, just a second. Let me get, this is not the right thing here. Do you see it, Joe? Okay, very good. So the first one is Louis Sullivan, an introduction. So I'm going to have my friend Rupali talk about Louis Sullivan. So the question, and then I'm going to invite everybody else, anybody else who wants to add. I know Maritza participated in the Louis Sullivan meetups, of what they got from Louis Sullivan meetups, and in particular, how is Louis Sullivan's approach a comprehensivist approach? So I'm going to just have Rupali talk about it first. Rupali, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So the first time I heard of Louis Sullivan was during my architecture days. As a student of architecture, I came across his writings and his books. And I was really just struck by his designs and his approach to design. The whole idea of bringing nature and in a way to his work. So at that time, I didn't realize this, but now I understand much more that he derives his inspiration from nature. And he says, if you understand nature, understand yourself, you understand society. The other thing about Louis Sullivan is he can connect so many different aspects of our being, right? So he is spiritual in a way. He enjoyed Walt Whitman's work, and his idea of freedom and
I think there is a problem with Rupali's video. Joe, do you
that
give...
then results if allow an individual.
She's cutting off.
Yeah,
Yes.
like it's I can't
Rupali,
discern
there is
which.
some problem with your video, your audio. Do you
I'll,
want
I'll leave and I'll join back.
Sure, sounds good.
Oh, you're muted, Shakant.
Sorry, Maritza, would you like to comment on Louis Sullivan and comprehensivism?
Sure, I'll jump in until Rupali gets back. So I am the opposite end of the spectrum from Rupali. This video, Louis Sullivan, an introduction, it was truly an introduction for me. I had only heard of it maybe a week or two prior when Shrikant suggested that I buy the book, the Kindergarten Chats, and we were talking about it. For me, at this point, I did not know what a mind-changing experience reading Sullivan would be. So I'm going to stop there since Rupali's back.
Wonderful. Rupali, go ahead.
Right. So what I was saying is that in Louis Sullivan's approach, he was aware of so many.
Oh, just a second. Sorry, instead of Sorry about that. Rupali, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay. So Louis Sullivan, his approach to his work, to his life was based on the philosophy that individuals can achieve the greatest that they're meant to achieve. And so at heart, he was a philosopher. As an architect, as an artist, you can see his work in the many buildings he created. He was prolific in his activity as an architect. His writing is very poetic. He enjoyed gardening. Anyone who knows about Louis Sullivan's work knows that he enjoyed growing roses. And he took a lot of lessons from his observations as a gardener um, about how nature works, and applied that to his own spiritual growth as well as in his writing, which is helpful for anybody who wants to understand how nature and humans work. He also spent a lot of time on talking about sociology and how the job of an architect is not just building buildings, but buildings are where people reside, and they are extremely interactive spaces for humans. And so how does a building affect the culture of a civilization? So his buildings speak to that. If we look at his book, Kindergarten Chats, you can see clearly that he's a master teacher. He's talking about architecture to a young student of architecture who's just graduated. And you can see how he leads the student. He does not tell the student what to do, but he just teaches the student to observe and come to their own conclusion. And as Maritza was saying, how transformative that experience is, you can see how the student changes throughout this book. You see his writings, and you see the thinker behind. I mean, he thinks deeply about every subject, every topic that he considers. And I could go on. He's ethical in his practice. He interprets life for as an initiator of life, not as a passive person. Very optimistic in his approach. If you read his poems, he's very optimistic, uplifting, and he always he ends his books with a positive note of an action. Go ahead and start doing something. Do your own thing. So overall, I just feel that Louis Sullivan contributes in so many ways to society, not just as an architect, but as a philosopher.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. Maritza, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I would like to add that there are one or two concepts from Louis Sullivan that I find to be threaded throughout almost every topic that we have tackled here on Comprehensivist Wednesdays. So I have, some quotes of his that I kept, and I tend to keep them fairly close because I find it's good to reread them. And one that he says to us is, he says, lack of imagination is a step towards perversion of power, loss of a sense of reality. It's like a gigantic energy gone wrong. And he also tells us that, he talks often about things being iterative. And I find that, he says, the voice of I will is faint. The I gets lost. I'm sorry, this is my words, not his quote, sorry. It says, so what I hear when he says that, it's the I gets lost. It means soot and murk may suffocate seedlings. Air is necessary for the I to flourish. It needs the fertilization provided by thought and imagination. And I hear that every time we get together here on Wednesdays and we discuss the different topics that, we're exploring. And then especially when we're invited to view several of the topics topically, one is reminded of Sullivan's urges that Rupali was saying, the power to do, the will to do, he does spur action, and he spurs action in an ebb and flow type of pattern where we constantly are looking to nature and then coming back and looking again. And it's a dance that we see in Sullivan's works. And I believe that we are invited to do that same dance every time we get to gather here on Wednesdays.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marissa. Well, folks, so we're going to intersperse between favorite meetups of people and then going through just the list of meetups in terms of the order. So we're going to, I know Mike has a favorite meetup, so I'm going to go to Mike next, but I want to make just one comment. It's really interesting how many of the thinkers that we have studied are architects. I don't think it's an accident. Buckminster Fuller, Louis Sullivan, Harold Nelson, Ackoff, all of them are architects, because architects have to be comprehensivists. They have to bring together all kinds of, the inner life of people, outer life of people, individual, social, functional, aesthetic, all of it has to be brought together. And that's what all these architects do. So thank you. Mike, are you ready to share your favorite meetup? Let's go with just one, and then we will rotate through. So you, then Joe, and then anybody else who wants to share their favorite meetup. Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. I don't have a particular meetup, but I have the starting one, which was the meetups on polymathy, specifically run by Dr. Cortellesa. And then I have the book Sparks of Genius by Michelle and Robert Root. And the reason I was so attracted to those was at the beginning, when I first met all of you here at 52 Living Ideas, I was inspired that you kind of ran this full circle of disciplines that you studied. And at first there was a sense of intimidation, because I realized I saw all the breadth. And then I also realized there were people here that could kind of go deep in some of these subjects. But what those meetups did for me specifically is, especially Dr. Cortellesa, she took away the stigma of polymathy not being Da Vinci-like. That was always my impression. If somebody was called a polymath, they were these incredibly gifted, well-versed folks, where she kind of said, no, it's really just a question of degree. And so that disarmed me. And then I had watched a couple with the Roots and then picked up the book. And what I liked most about Sparks of Genius, it's more of a reference book. And I'll refer you to chapters 7 and 8. So they broke the book down into 13 chapters, or more or less qualities that creative people have. And 7 is something called forming patterns. And then 8 is analogizing. And for me, as being a chess coach, that was, seeing patterns is all we do. And then as a teacher, we also need to take these patterns and create analogies for students, because I find that to be an excellent way to learn. If you're confused about something, it could be mathematical, but if you have a really good teacher, they can make an analogy for you that's actually teaching you the math, but maybe they're giving it to you more in something that's artistic and less mathematical. So those 2 particular chapters hit me, and it's like, wow, man, that's really what I think comprehensivism is about, that you have to create your own tricks or tools of the trade to take you across the disciplines. And that's what I took the most. I wanted to make a very brief comment. I'll conclude. What was the name of Louis Sullivan's teacher? Was it Moses was the first name?
Yes, Moses.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because I read Autobiography of an Idea this summer. And that kind of connected as well, because I think along the way, you have to find somebody, because he even shouts out in the book, yes, a teacher, And when I read that, I said, that's the key. If you want to study all these disciplines, don't get intimidated, but find that one teacher or group that'll kind of inspire you. So that was my favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just comment on these 2 points, the 2 points that you made, one of kind of breadth and depth. One of the great things that came out when CJ did his meetup on intellectual virtues is that, I think looking for the breadth of being macro comprehensive and depth of micro incisive actually captures this entire dance beautifully, that you're doing both. And it's not either or, it's actually each help you with the other, that you can go deep because you're broad, and vice versa. You can go broad because you know where you need to go broad because you are deep. So that's a beautiful point. And the last point about teacher, what happens is that in certain people, these principles actually live. They embody those principles. And all these ideas are useless unless they're embodied. And so learning from another human being how to put it together so that you can actually carry it out, so that they act as a prototype, is a very profound gift that one human being can give another. Thank you, Mike. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Katie. You're welcome to talk about just one of the meetups that you like, any one or a meetup series, and you can type exclamation mark as many times as you want to keep adding to this. Go ahead, Joe.
So, I have to comment on form follows function. That I think that's essential for me and the way I look at things. And the reason it touches so many different meetups, I think about it in terms of my life. And then also when we were reading things, even like the Bible, I found that it was interesting that where we had, you had Christ going around and actually, performing miracles. And everybody's like, well, wait a minute, you didn't do it on the Sabbath, or, you did it on the Sabbath. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you're actually performing a miracle here. And you're forgetting the whole entire point, the whole entire objective. And I think there's something much deeper there. It's that when you hold on to the form and how you like what the forms are, you miss the entire point of what's going on and why something exists in the first place. That happens continually in people's lives. When they actually hold on to, and you see this maybe to their jobs, to the way they want to do things a certain way. They get rooted in a way of doing things, and that's it. They're not going to change. And what they're attaching themselves is to the form, to the job, as opposed to actually adapting and thinking about how can their job best serve the actual value that they're supposed to be providing. So in that process, you sometimes forget, why you were doing something in the first place. This actually also can hit home on a number of levels, sometimes on a very personal level. Sometimes it's, one example that I used to think about it as well is even, in the Jewish religion, you can, technically you mourn for a year and mourn somebody's death for a year. And after that, you're mourning yourself. And I thought about that. Sometimes people hang on to the forms of the individuals and they don't let go. And when you don't let go and you don't let a person go sometimes, then you're mourning yourself in that process. And that's not really, you're kind of looking at it from a perspective of you're looking at the form deriving the form was actually driving your life, not necessarily the function. It's a hard way to explain it. Maybe that wasn't the best example, but I've thought about it from that perspective. I think that applies to every aspect of where I look at when I look at systems and systems thinking in Buckminster Fuller. I think it plays a very large role, and that how we sometimes we get stuck in doing certain things, like we adopt certain ways of doing things, as I mentioned already, as opposed to integrating and evolving. And I think that's what Louis Sullivan also does, is the idea he looks to nature and wonders how something should evolve as well. So I think that was one of the most important, and I think that touches so many of our meetups. I have a couple others. I mean, I can go on.
Please keep typing exclamation marks so you can come back and add to more, because I want to get as many voices on the table as possible. So folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark to talk about one of your favorite meetups. It's going to be Katie, followed by Laura next. Katie.
One of my favorite meetups, my absolute favorite meetup was the last one. We talked about the idea of adequate, because that, before I had thought of myself as an expert, I thought maybe, you know, these comprehensivists maybe have a kind of delusional quest to know everything. But then I realized, no, they just say adequate. So for me, that's definitely true, like getting an adequate understanding of a broad range of topics and just knowing enough about a lot of different things that really changed it to be a very practical quest.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. That is tremendously liberating process of just accepting your limitations. You know, you basically, it's a question of saying, you know, everything is measured, and, you know, is it adequate in the sense that does it meet the requirements? Instead of saying, oh, I'm not there, you're saying, okay, this is what is needed to do this. Can I do that? So wonderful. Thank you. Laura, what is one of your favorite meetups?
Okay, I have two things, and my memory is not working well. Remember the Uptila? What is that? The guy. And what was it? Uptila? You know, the
OODA loop. OODA loop.
OODA loop?
That's OODA loop. Yeah.
Okay.
I really love those. That were wonderful. And I have to say, I would say I have to go back to the same thing we've been talking about with Louis Sullivan, except I really feel like he changed my life, because I remember the scene when he kept wanting to look at that big tree, and when he came upon that big tree and thinking about it, just all of a sudden something about, you know, how much we need nature for our own growth and how we have to see ourselves growing in similar ways. And I mean, he's spiritual in many ways, and he's earnest, and he is artistic, and he's also very, he's not snobbish about things. He doesn't walk around saying, oh, look what I found. You know, I know that. Very personal. And I don't know, now I look outside in nature, and I mean, I start talking about the tree and this and that. Sometimes I'm with my daughter and she thinks I'm nuts. But I said, you just have to read Louis Sullivan to appreciate that. You know, look at this little bud in the ground, you know, tiny little flower that's coming out of nowhere. And I'm like going wild, you know, on the seed of, so it definitely, it entertains me when I'm out and about, because there is so much in nature. And of course, when we're in New York, I guess we have to consider cement and so forth, our nature, which also comes with a lot of stuff, you know, and it may not be dug in the ground, but it's on the surface, and maybe that's how we live, too much on the surface. So that tells us something about life here. And then I would say that I just love the other, and I think those are my favorite, and maybe one more. It's just any one of the ones on systems, because I love systems, period. So that's that a category. I can't give you an example. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back for how much I'll be back now.
Thank you. All right, let's keep rotating people. So anybody who is new, Maritza, you said you had some favorite meetups. Can you share one of them and then it'll be Joe. And folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark in order to share your favorite meetups.
So one of mine that is a favorite actually wasn't a favorite at first. I was confounded by, so the whole shebang, it's actually I forget which came first. There was, so we tackled the chapter on the whole in the design way. And it's complementary to the discussion we did here on the whole shebang. And it took the second of these two. And so I believe the whole shebang came first. And it wasn't until we went through the design way that it clicked for me, because I really was left baffled. And it's rare that I'm just left baffled by a discussion that the CJ presents, especially with everyone else helping to clarify. But I was really stuck. So the concept of the whole shebang is you have to pull things apart. And we also kind of discussed that a little bit with Akoff, but the idea of, you have to pull out the parts to get to the whole. And it wasn't tracking for me. But then when we revisited it in the design way, it was presented, and he brought up the same, and literally it's the same words that were used in the whole shebang discussion, but it clicked in a different way. And then since then, I've actually watched the video a few times, because I'm fascinated because I remember my confusion, and now it just makes so much sense. So what is fascinating to me is the idea of it's a matter of not getting stuck. And I see it as it's just another way of reminding me to not get stuck, right? So you have to consider something as a whole, but there requires an acknowledgement of all the variety of parts that exist within it. So when we're being told that, you have to take everything apart so that you can just put it back together again, it's literally really the idea of reminding you that, the output or the intended result of whatever it is we're designing, it stems from many different components. And that's almost such a simple concept. So for me, I really appreciated this discussion, because I think that it's one of those things that it's so easy to overlook in our day-to-day, because we tend to assume, I know what the whole of something is. It doesn't require thinking about it. So I like being told, no, take that moment, think about it, consider everything that comes within that. So that now when you're trying to come up with a solution, you may come up with something slightly more impressive, or maybe more easily come to the solution, because in considering the many parts that make your whole, you now may have that little something that presents clarity, whereas you wouldn't have had it before. So I really enjoy that one.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marissa. Next up is Judy, and then Joe. Judy.
Okay, I love all the meetups, of course, but one of my favorites is the one called Reading, Writing, Listening, and Speaking. It just made me connect with my core. I love to read, and I've been reading since I was a child, many books, and I've been absorbed by some books that I can't stop reading. So it's a real big thing for me to read. But writing became even more important when I started writing journals and history book and history of my life, and autobiographies of of myself, and biographies of my family, and looking into my ancestors. And I started writing a lot. And I also did a lot of business writing in my courses that I taught. And I also took a lot of academic classes when I wrote a lot of essays and theses. So I learned to love to write. I learned that. So this course brought back this love for reading and writing that I've always had, but somehow I hadn't really pinpointed that this was like part of my core. And when everybody just at the end just synthesize everything, like, okay, holistically, what are reading and writing about together and speaking and listening. And it's just like, wow, this is really something that inspires me. And it has been inspiring me for so long. So it just brought back a lot of good times, good memories, good moments with myself, because you do this very lonely act, both reading and writing. And it just made me feel that it had been well deserved, these two skills in both languages, because I do it in both languages, Spanish and English. So it just brought back a lot of good memories. Yeah, that was my favorite.
Thank you, Judy. I think writing is special because what it does is that it increases your self-awareness. Because once you put something down on paper, you can look at it, you can consider it, say, okay, did I get it right? Is it connected to something else?
Right.
How can I put it together? Is it precise enough? And all of that generates it creates this loop, feedback loop between the paper and your brain.
Yeah.
That can make your brain really do things which it couldn't do without it.
Exactly.
So thank you for bringing that up. Next, I'm going to go to Rupali, and then I'm going to jump to the list that I have, and I'm going to go to, we have already talked about the #1 comprehensivist meetup, Louis Sullivan, and I'm going to have the person who did the second most popular meetup, Joe, give a quick overview of the book Range afterwards. But first, Rupali. Rupali, go ahead.
So I want to share another meetup that I enjoyed. It was the Radiant Hexagon. I think it was on Wednesdays, right?
Yes.
And the reason I liked that was because, yes, we had read Louis Sullivan and we had done Bhagavad Gita and we'd done, I think we'd done The Fountainhead. And taking all those concepts, ideas from those meetups and putting them on a diagram was just brilliant. And I was able to use that Radiant Hexagon in our school. And all the teachers loved it because it is very colorful. It's very easy to understand. And the 3 layered the scaled system to say, what does this child need? Can we use the Radiant Hexagon? Even the name Radiant Hexagon is so positive that it's not a progress report. This is your child. Here is the Radiant Hexagon. Where is your child on this? It's easier for the parents to understand. It's easy for the teachers to talk about. Oh, he's very good at imagination and creativity, but guess what? He needs more work on writing and spelling. Very easy to say that than saying, oh, your child has 90 in math, but we can't even scale his imagination and talk about, what grade he gets for creativity. So I think that for me to be able to take the ideas that I had learned in other meetups and be able to concretely share with my team and our school, the Radiant Hexagon really helped me do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Joe, can I ask you for a favor? People are talking about different meetups. If you could search for them on the Comprehensivist meetups and
Sure.
post it, whichever ones you remember people doing. And
Sure.
if anybody, that would be great, Joe. Thank you. And
Sure.
Thank you for your help. Let's go to Brian next, and then we'll go to Joe. Brian.
Okay, this is going to be fairly brief. Most of my meetups, my favorites are centered around systems theory. I particularly enjoyed Fuller, Ackoff, and a few others we've had in there. But the one that I remember most and probably got the most enjoyment out of was one when I first started coming to these meetups, and it was by a lady called Karen Montanaro. And it was about art experience and looking at your identity and how we relate to art. And that was a fantastic meetup. And I enjoy rewatching that, I must admit. So that's it.
Wonderful, Brian. She did such a fantastic job. She had a and she's a dancer. So
Yeah.
she actually illustrated this. She said, most people think of things as being individual versus social. Either you are individualistic or you focus on other people, let other people do things. This says, no, it's not like that. It is, the difference is between fear and love. When you fear, you don't express yourself. You go like this. And you also have fear of other people, so you go like that. But when you love, you go like that. You spread out your wings, both your wings. You're seeing yourself. You're not afraid to see yourself. And you are engaging other people. You're not afraid of other people. And both of them actually go together. So you either love or you fear. Thank you, Brian, for bringing that up. Joe, so somebody called Joe did this meetup on Range, which got more than 2,000 views. What is it about this book? You will need to unmute, Joe.
Happens when I put the Karen's
Okay.
video up, I hit play and it started going,
okay.
and I was just like,
Sure.
oh, and so I
Okay.
kept it on mute
Sure.
for a minute. Yeah, no, I mean, the book Range is a very powerful book. I mean, it kind of, captures everything here that we're trying to accomplish here at 52 Living Ideas. Essentially, what it was initially was a counter to the 10,000 hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell had come out with, saying that if you put 10,000 hours into something, that that you can achieve anything. This is the best way for human development, and ultimately, it is about human development. So, what basically, David Epstein is basically saying is that no, human development is very different. It's slow. It's something where you have to go through a sampling period. And when you go through this sampling period, you're kind of figuring things out and you're acquiring skills that you don't, that you can, that are transferable to any other division. And this is something that where we tend to be in a hyper specialized society. He was countering a narrative that you had to know what you wanted to do early, that you had to work really hard at it, and that was the best way to achieve success, to become a successful. But what his research revealed ultimately was that most people that reach the highest level of, and in particularly their sports or even their professions, that ultimately they went through, they weren't hyper focused, that they played, like Yo-Yo Ma played a lot of different instruments prior to becoming, a world-renowned cellist. That a lot of these things were, the more you experience, that the more you're actually going to have an opportunity to be successful. But there's something really important in the book that I like more than anything else, is that the thing that I like is that there's the lateral thinking aspect of things, is that he uses an engineer that worked at, I believe, Sony, and then went to Nintendo. I could be wrong about that. But he, he was an engineer that was just an average engineer, but he had experience in a number of different areas. And what he was able to do is take parts from each area that he had learned, from each company that he had worked at, and innovate and create new ideas. And he created what was called the Game Boy, which was a very popular gaming system back in the 80s. So it was the power of lateral thinking, and then also analogical thinking is something that he focused on too. The ability to think at a higher level where you can start to connect the dots and understand, how things work as a whole. And I think that gets kind of what we're talking about with Akoff, is that you start to see how things work together. The other thing he talked about that was really important in there, he talked about kind learning environments and wicked learning environments. And we kind of touched upon this with the design way as well, with wicked problems versus, kind problems. They're very similar. But these kind learning environments is the feedback loop is something that we do something, we get a reward. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a repetitive action. So he uses the example of golf as an example. If you play golf, that it's a sport where it's just you, it's not a lot of variation, and you're just working on your own personal game. But if you get into something like a team sport where it's a little bit more wicked, where there's a lot of moving parts, there's other individuals involved, that, repetition is not necessarily something that is as beneficial. But he also equates that to other areas and to areas like mathematics and other disciplines. But to me, the book Range really speaks to what we're trying to do here at Comprehensivist Wednesdays, is that we're trying to really kind of build an assortment of skills and ideas and learn about different things so that we can actually make connections between things. And I think that actually holds very true for there are a couple of other meetups that you can start to make connections with. I can talk about those, but I mean, I'll stop with Range.
Sure.
But I do want to talk about some of the connections with
Absolutely. We'll keep on just cycling through people.
Specifically the Russell Akoff one. Yeah, I think that's a really important one. So, yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be Laura, followed by Chad, and then Maritza. Laura.
Okay, I think about this now, and I'm sort of imagining a montage of all of these things put together and thinking that you could cut a piece out of the montage that would give you the full circle of all of these things. And from that, excuse me, you can develop out further. I love the fact that for me, the best thing, and since I was such a, like I say, in the trench person and, came up with ideas of things just on the basis of observation and understanding, students' needs. And I came here and, they're talking about sort of a more philosophical aspects, but I could always take it and say, but I thought about that because I was working in this applied way. And that's what, for me, I love, because it's validated the work I did for so many years. And so that being said, I think that, I have this picture in my mind of this huge montage now, everything's multicolored and beautiful and everything looks like a piece of art. Every part of it looks like a piece of art. So you cut out a slice of this art, this beautiful art, and you begin to, find in that art the forms and the functions. And, from there you can now build out your own thinking. And so that little slice serves as a basis or the beginning of a new dimension of ideas, because I think all of this has to be seen as something that allows for growth. It has to be a point of growth, and that we said about needing to be able to move into. And I think that's where I see Lewis Sullivan coming in. I see all the systems coming in. I see so much of the thinking coming in, and however you want to look at it, whether they're looking from the trenches or from the outer space, there's truth in all of it, and we can find the truth for ourselves in it for our own need, and I think we can also globally find truth in it, for everyone. So I'll leave you with that thought because I'm running out of the voice, and you're lucky, right? Because I've been very stream of consciousness lately, so I've got to go back to 2 minutes, and I don't know if I can handle it. So.
Thank you. You did it, Laura. Thank you. Next up is going to be Chad. Chad, go ahead.
I am Chad Morrison. I'm from Rhode Island, and I'm a structural engineer. So thanks for having me. A few comments spurred me to think maybe I should do some show and tell here. You guys may be of some interest of some pieces in my collection. Here I have a guitar pick. It is from James Williamson, who played for Iggy and the Stooges. And after being in a punk band, he went on to become an electrical engineer for Sony, and rose to the top level of executive, and was actually responsible for standardization of Blu-ray discs. So he's in 2 Hall of Fames, the Electrical Engineering Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Another interesting piece that you guys might appreciate that sports fans really don't, because he wasn't really the best or notable pitcher, but I have an autograph here of Skip Linwood, who was actually the only Major League Baseball player to attend MIT.
Wonderful. You're on mute. Your sound is stopped.
No,
Okay, go ahead.
I appreciate
Okay.
the group, and I just finished the biography here, so I'm excited to
Wonderful.
hear what you guys have to think.
Thank you. Thank you, Chad. All right, next up is Marissa.
So first I would like to say just a quick thing off of Joe's range. It's a fascinating book. I love the tying there for me is that it's kind of something Mike was saying about, you know, sometimes the word polymathy sounds almost scary. You know, it's like it almost seems like, oh, I couldn't possibly be that. I don't have that level of whatever it is. I don't know what is needed to be there, but certainly I'm not one of them. And range is nice because it shows you that, you know, it's not, you don't have to be so only one being, you can have many. So I just want to say that real quick. And if you will allow me a little bit of hubris here, actually one of my favorite Comprehensivist Wednesdays is one that I led, actually. Yeah, I know, a little bit full of myself, yes. Anyway, so with the Thinking Society, CJ presented a discussion. We had a discussion and a dialogue with CJ, and he brought up a video, and it was kind of like a cameo. He mentioned it. It was like one of his suggested readings. He didn't even say much about it, but in prepping, because, you know, if you guys have ever joined any of the Thinking Society discussions, CJ gives you a book of his thesis and all his supporting documents, and you need to take a week to prepare for the discussion. It's fantastic, actually. So this video was called The Danger of the Single Story. And I was so enamored of this story that I did a Thinking Society discussion, and we turned it over. And then I brought it up to Chicago. We did something about, I think it was multiple hypotheses or something about solutions. It might have even been Akoff solution, something solution theory. In one of the Comprehensive Wednesdays, I said, you know, I kind of think I want to explore that concept in tandem with this video that I can't get out of my head. And, you know, Chicago's like, sure, I'll next Wednesday, you're good. And so I got the opportunity to look at the danger of the single story or the single solution. And I absolutely love that, because I loved being able to, well, first, the ability to bring in a Nigerian author's point of view and tie it into a very Western concept on almost systems theory, right? It was just fascinating. And again, the threads, it's one of those concepts that to me applies to almost all of our comprehensive thinking. And so it does remain one of my favorites. Also, I actually just did a culture a presentation. I led a group with my job. They were trying to do these different diversity things, and I did recommend this video, and it's the one that was presented. So I was excited about that. So to me, this one holds a special spot because I appreciate that she can't let me bring it here to this platform so that we could all turn it over together in different aspects. And just to give you a little more detail on what it is, because, you know, I've been talking about my feelings, let me talk about the actual discussion that we had here. You know, we were talking about, so Adichie is her last name. And what she's telling us is that our lives, our cultures are composed of many overlapping stories. And, you know, she says that the danger, actually, I have this written down. I'm not sure if she said it or if I did, it might be a mix of both. The danger of searching for the one true cause or the one solution gives us this fallacy of the single cause. People tend to prefer simple, single cause explanations. Solutions to more complex ones confound them. The single perspective instinct takes over. So, you know, we find simple ideas alluring because we like feeling like we really do know and understand something. But that instinct can go awry if we make, you know, we hear one story and then we assume, oh, everything is just like this one thing. And once we've assimilated that as the one thing, well, now we have blinders and we're less open to any other story or other perspectives. And it also ties in, you know, with the theory of the multiple perspectives that CJ invites us to ponder in one of his Comprehensivist Wednesday events. And so and I think it's such a profound concept. And it's one of those that we are all of us at some point guilty of failing to wonder, what's the other side of this? And I think we're all of us the better for trying and attempting to ask that question more often. Thank you.
Wonderful, Marisa. I want to point out another meetup that you did where we got a point from the other side. You're doing a meetup on Aborigine culture, and somebody from Australia showed up who'd spent considerable amount of time, the other side of the earth. They just showed up, and he had so much expertise on.
It was so awesome. That was, I couldn't even believe, like, I started the meeting going, guys, I'm so not an expert. I'm not sure I'm qualified to be given this. Forgive me for presenting this. I don't know a lot about it. So it was like somebody had literally answered a prayer of mine. Sure, you're not sure what you're doing? Plop, here you go. Somebody who lives this. Amazing.
Yes. And, you know, just like always, we immediately made him like almost the co-host or the main presenter, actually, of this one. And it just worked out so beautifully. And that's the greatness of this medium, that, you know, people just show up from so many different places. You know, I have to tell you another, like, one of the most amazing things that happened was this guy called Yogeshwar shows up. You know, I'm doing meetups on Gita, and this guy Yogeshwar just shows up, and he's curious. First meetup, he was kind of quiet, but he made some comments, and I was just stunned of how deep they were. And so I got talked to, you know, and he was actually attending many of our meetups. He was attending meetups on Gospel of John, on Tao Te Ching. And then I started talking to him, and he had studied Bhagavad Gita. He had been studying Bhagavad Gita nonstop, 24 hours a day for the past 4 years, learning Sanskrit, every commentary on Sanskrit. And he did 100 meetups with us on Bhagavad Gita, which is just incredible. So it's just amazing to have this medium where we do the best we can and be open to whoever shows up and see what they can add. So thank you. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to come back to one of my favorite meetups was definitely Russell Ackoff on a number of different levels. You know, we talked a little bit about understanding the whole and the system itself. But the thing that he highlighted the most that I thought was really the most profound is the importance of asking the right questions. And where he takes the example of a group of incoming students that were going to go to Case Western. There are about, I forget how many, and they were doing an internship and they were given like a real world problem to measure the flow rate of water in between you know, a set of pipes. I forget the exact problem that they were actually solving. But in order to solve the problem, they actually needed to know differential equations. And they said, well, you know, basically they were given textbooks and they said, you can ask me any question that you want, you know, that you asked the professor. And not only they were able to provide a solution at the end of the internship or whatever that they were going through, but 95% of those students passed out of the first 2 years of mathematics at Case Western University. They tested in, you know, at a higher rate. But what the overall importance of that is that he was talking about learning and how we learn. And we learn by doing and asking questions. And I think that that's really kind of the key of Comprehensivist Wednesdays here. When we come here, we're coming here and we're trying to figure out how to ask the best questions, how to cultivate our ignorance, how to understand problems. And I think that he also went into the whole idea of the university. He says, you know, the university is we're professional learners. You know that you know, and he goes into how the students, you know, they learn from the students essentially, and how it's backwards. The whole process is backwards for learning. This also links to one that I had led as well, is that based on like, how do you cultivate your ignorance? You know, how do you cultivate your own? And you do that by, you know, learning what is left to be known. You know, what is left, and the only reason you can ask that question is that, you know, he would is because you start to figure out, not because you're given a set of answers or just given stuff to regurgitate. It's that you're given the tools to be able to think critically and to ask the correct, right kind of ask a question. And that's actually the same thing the book Range really kind of gets to too, in a way. I mean, the book Range speaks to that as well, because the more experiences that you have, the more you're able to kind of to think laterally and to ask questions about other disciplines. You're able to take generalized principles and apply them. And I think that that's one of the most important things that's the point of comprehensivism, is that you can start to develop ways. I thought that one of the ones that you led on virtue was actually one of the best Comprehensivist Wednesdays as well. But I think that's the thing, is that we're learning to ask the right, even form follows function. One more aspect of that. When you start to think about the function of something, you have to start to ask the right questions as well. That's another very, you know, direct connection there. So I think that that's the beauty of Comprehensivist Wednesdays, is that, and when you come here, you never know what that question or what you're going to learn. So anyway.
Wonderful. So now I'm going to begin listing the top meetups, and I'll say a really few things about them, a little bit about each of them, and then invite anybody to talk about any of these meetups. The top one, of course, is Louis Sullivan. This is definitely one of my absolute favorite thinkers. The second one is the one on Range. The third one is the OODA loop. John Boyd, this is the presentations that were made by his students who have actually been responsible for transforming the US military. Incredible presentations. Then there is one, what does thought look like within the brain? This is a series that Sanjay is doing for us on neuroscience. It's an incredible series. So this was 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth one is a meetup by Yasuhiko Kimura on authenticity, the courage to be yourself. Authenticity, the courage to be yourself. It's an amazing meetup. The entire series that Yasuhiko is doing, he's like the comprehensivist himself. You know, it's like Mr. Comprehensivist. He's grew up in Japan, became a Zen Buddhist monk at the age of 16, spent 3 years in India studying Indian scriptures, came to the West. It just incredible story. Is everything, you know, has all of the Western context ideas, and he's able to span effortlessly between that. He's done his latest series that he's done is on new spirituality for the future. So again, the next one is on why be comprehensivist. The one after that is on syntopical reading, which has been a core part of all my meetups here in person. The idea that you read, you don't just read a book, but you read many books together on the same topic, where you create a conversation between the authors. And in that conversation, you add your own voice to talk to these authors, to formulate your own ideas in relationship with this great conversation that you have created by choosing to read multiple books on the same topic. So these are the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 more. The next one is the one that we have already mentioned by Ruth Bernstein's on Sparks of Genius. And the next 2 are on Buckminster Fuller. And I want to do a lot more on Buckminster Fuller because he's a very deep thinker. He's a tremendous influence on CJ. And CJ's vision of collaborating for comprehensivity is based on Buckminster Fuller's ideas. We have done the one on Buckminster Fuller General Systems Theory. This is from the operating manual for Spaceship Earth. And CJ did a meetup on Mistake Mystique on Buckminster Fuller. So these are the top 10 comprehensivist meetups. Anybody wants to comment on any of them, you're welcome to do that. Rupali is first. Rupali.
So I want to just say that Yasuhiko's meetups are outstanding. I listened to his meetups several times, and every time I feel that I learn something new. He can pull together learnings from the past and then give a direction for where we are today and where we are headed forward. And it starts with improving your own self. And then by making yourself better, making your environment better, you can have an impact on the betterment of the world. So really very good meetups. I also enjoyed the meetup on how to read a book. It was done I think it's one of the oldest ones. And the other meetup, and I don't know whether it was done on Wednesdays or not, but it was the Silver Trumpet.
Yes.
Which we are now reading with our students at school. And
How's that going, Rupali?
Oh my goodness, it is just mind-blowing because they can't stop. They love the fat podger. They love the princess. And when the trumpet goes rooty tooty too, they sing that whole thing. I mean, that book just captures children's imagination. When we read it as adults, it's nowhere close to how children understand that book or assimilate that book. And I had the children talk about it and recorded that. So maybe at some point I'd love to share their thoughts.
I just want to say one thing here. The children of Tolkien also had the same reaction to this book. This was I think it was C.S. Lewis who lent Tolkien this book, and Tolkien's children were just so enamored by it that all the characters became like household characters, and they're all the time they would say, "You're not going to give this book back to Mr. Lewis, are you?" That was their biggest concern. But wonderful. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Maritza. Joe.
I'm trying to think of the ones that you mentioned. So the OODA loop, I thought, was one of the most important ones, primarily because it really helps you deal with uncertainty and change your orientation. And actually that it's essentially it's the scientific method, but it's kind of a new way of looking at the scientific method. And it's kind of almost like where you're constantly reassessing, your perspective. And I think that that's really, to me, when you look at the diagram that they put together, and even though they debated it, whether, to put together the way they did, essentially the orientation phase in helping you deal with chaos and make decisions quickly, I think was probably one of the more powerful, and then if you get into creative and destruction, I don't know if that was a Wednesday's creation.
It doesn't have to be Wednesdays, because what happens is that like almost everything that we do on 52 Living Ideas has the comprehensivist flavor to it. And many times if things get both kind of, they come out from the comprehensivist Wednesdays and then spread, or they grow somewhere else or come back into comprehensivist Wednesdays. So yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I thought that was one of the most, that too. I mean, like essentially, how to rethink your position, essentially. And it's that's what I find as one. Mistake Mystique is actually another one that I think there's a sense of naivete that goes into that one, where you're asking questions that you wouldn't normally ask, and you're trying to fill in the gaps of what you don't know. And that's what I remember so distinctly about that, is that don't be afraid to make mistakes. When you're at the types of questions that you ask sometimes, that you may think you're going down the wrong path, but you're really not. It's really about that too, is actually about formulating good questions as much as anything else. That's what Mistake Mystique was essentially about. And I think that was one of the most important meetups that CJ has done. There's a few that he's done. I think the one on meaning making was also very important as well. But I think that Mistake Mystique is, and that's Buckminster. Then the Chrono Files was a very good one that he did with Buckminster Fuller, where he went through this idea. He talked a little bit about ephemeralization, about doing more and more with less and less, and how we would become more efficient. But the thing is that he talked about in that particular meetup, if I remember correctly, I do actually, it's that we were able to do more and more with less resources, primarily by applying Buckminster Fuller's principles. And he was able to predict a lot of these things. Like, and if you read Buckminster Fuller's, whether it be Utopia or Oblivion or Grunch of the Giants or any of these other books that he's written, or even Synergetics, you see that he's very good many times at predicting where systems are actually headed and where they're going to end up. And And he's using certain principles by doing that. And he's able to develop those principles by developing the chronophiles that he talks about over a period of his life. He goes through a period of documentation and he develops a set of principles that helps him predict what systems are going to look like in the future. So I thought that that was a very, very good one as well. Anyway, that's just
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Maritza, followed by Laura. Maritza.
So I wanted to bring up and highlight the mistake mystique as well. So Joe beat me to it, but Bucky in his book Synergetics, basically what he's saying to us is dare to be naive, and that's such a powerful statement. And the idea that mistake making is like the most important part of our learning. I think I had never before considered that our mistakes are like in the way that in CJ's actual words, he says it's a vital epistemic virtue for our comprehensivity because it puts us in direct contact with how we create at an elemental level. That's a mind-blowing statement. It's just, the idea that our collective intelligence is formed by our experiences, and what is most of our experience made up of but mistakes. So it's one of those things where you really need to go sit in a corner and ponder with it, right? And in the same discussion, he also throws in the concept of the role of ignorance. So he goes one step further. He's saying embrace your mistakes, but don't just do that. Also acknowledge the value of ignorance. And he quotes Stuart Firestein, and he says, knowledge is a big subject. Ignorance is bigger, and it is more interesting. And I'm like, wait, what? But the idea that our stories are not to be thrown away because they're like ignorance, or it also highlights where we go wrong in history with some of our kind of putting data to the side because we think it's something that was come about in ignorance or without full concept of whatever it is they were saying. And he points out to us that what is science but collection of bits of pieces that started from a point of ignorance, and then you kept building upon it. So it ties in with Joe mentioned in so many of the collaborative discussions we've had where we're seeking to sharpen our question making, and this one fits in. And Joe talked about also the meaning making. So I can't resist but to bring up one of Yasuhiko's videos. It wasn't one of the top 10 ones, but it's Being and Becoming. It was one that I had actually missed, and I remember I started watching it. I have a habit of I like to watch them or listen to them while I'm working because I feel like my brain is doing numbers for work. So my word brain, I paused it so many times, the video, in the first 10 minutes that I was like, okay, clearly this requires both halves of my brain. And then I went back and it's even when I was giving it my full attention, I stopped the video a million times. It's like, I felt like every line, I think I must have written, I have like 10 pages on this, like it's an hour and a half maybe video. I think I probably wrote most of it as transcript because I kept thinking, this is the most important thing. No, this. And so it's like the idea, he tells us humanity is moving ever deeper into crisis, a crisis without precedent. It is a crisis brought about by cosmic evolution, irrevocably intent upon completely transforming only this integrated humanity in a completely integrated, comprehensively interconsiderate, harmonious whole. And that actually, it wasn't until after I wrote it down that he told us that was a Buckminster Fuller quote. And I was like, naturally, of course it is. Because everything Buckminster Fuller says requires me to go sit in a corner and cry for a bit and then come back and think on it for hours. But it's so, and it's wordy, because that is literally like a run-on sentence. But if we think about it, it's this, it's again, it's that concept of the whole and the pieces that I just apparently can't get away from. But it's the, you know, Yasuhiko says that awesome quote from Buckminster Fuller, but then he goes on and he adds a piece that he specifically states it was missing, what he believes was missing from Fuller's work in this topic. And he says, and this crisis without precedent cannot be fully understood without understanding the interior dimension of the crisis. And he tells us it's a crisis of consciousness. And again, it's just such an interesting, and you know, I would be like, never stop reading here, but the idea of human consciousness being, like he says, becoming becomes overcoming, and that evolution requires a devolutionary force. And it's that is what we are studying in so many different aspects. You know, we look at Louis Sullivan and we do the breaking in and the breaking out. You know, we look at the design way and we're reminded of the iterative nature of designing, you know. And when we look at, you know, obviously Buckminster Fuller, it's the parts and the whole, and it's this ebb and flow. And so I really found this episode, this Yasuhiko discussion, to be like so amazing. And it's interesting because he's clearly speaking of something that is new and revolutionary. And yet I see tendrils from that discussion going into so many of the other topics we've discussed, that it's just, to me, it's a great and beautiful like embodiment actually of this concept of collaborating for comprehensivity.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marisa. I don't know how, but Yasuhiko, every time he comes, his next meetup is usually my favorite. He's kept on adding and keeps on raising the level. I mean, it's just incredible. The next one is coming up on 13th, this Saturday or Sunday, 13th. I think it's Saturday the 13th. All right, next is Laura. Laura, would you like to comment on any of these 10 meetups?
Well, I have to say something. I think I should be voted like Miss Amalgamation for 2023 because everything that it's been spoken about and born out of Joe's initial story about the person who talked about problem solving and all of that, because Joe, that is my work. That is what I did with my students when I did my curriculum development and worked on the how to, what, you know, how come they haven't learned, and what is it, where's the essence, where does it begin? And it's with problems and questioning. And yes, mistakes are most important to, you know, for your learning. And so it's just, and listening to every bit of this, I feel like this, if I look at myself in relation to all the things that we've talked about, I see that beginning point when I was thinking about the issue of learning really opened my brain up and made me think of all of these aspects of things from a point of being a creator of a tool to a learner and a guider and all of that. And really, I listen to this and I go, oh yeah, that's what I was doing. That's what I was doing. That's what. So I you know, I hit upon everything in a certain way. So I think what I'm trying to say is you kind of need every one of these pieces in a certain sense to have any sense of whole, you know. And
Cool.
so, and can I say something else?
Sure, very quickly.
I have time.
Go to the next, yeah, very quickly, and then we'll go to the
No,
next.
no, go ahead.
Okay,
I'll
thank
do
you.
it later.
Thank you, Laura. Next, I want to show you the next 10 ones. The next 10 ones starts with Mark Stallman's How to Be an Autodidact. Mark Stallman has done just amazing, amazing stories with us. Next one after that is 3 meetups that Angela did with us on Polymath Power by Michael Araki, which is a very good introduction to polymathy. And then another one of meetups by Sanjay on neuroscience, the power of habits. Then we've got Buckminster Fuller again, his operating manual spaceship. And then there is Russell Ackoff, of course. And then comes the meetup that Brian talked about by Karen Montanaro on art experience and architecture of our identities. I like the title very much, Art Experience and Architecture of Our Identities. So these are the next bunch of meetups. If anybody wants to comment on any of them, go ahead and type in exclamation mark. We'll start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that operating manual for spaceship Earth is one of those critical ones. It's because it talks about specifically the origins of specialization in there, and that why we're specialized to begin with, and the process of specialization. So
Joe, do you mind if I make a point?
please.
I just read the first chapter of this book yesterday. And actually, the example that he gives in that first chapter is just perfect example of what the nature of a comprehensivist is.
Right.
What he's saying is that when long distance navigation and sailing with ships was discovered, at that time, most people just lived in their local surroundings. They were aware of, they didn't move much actually. 25 miles is about as much as people moved. And moving on land is very difficult. So they were aware of their own culture and their own surroundings, own resources that they had. The first comprehensivists were these traders who took to the seas and who realized that sea connects everybody. Water connects everybody. And they took the chance. They figured out how to build ships, how to do navigation. They had the courage. It was not risk-free. It was full of risks. And they took those risks. They went to people that they did not know. The people didn't do that. People just stayed with the people that they knew. They went all the way. They didn't know where they would end up. And they would go and talk to those people and figure out how to trade with them, look at things. And they were able to put together from resources and skills of varied people, things that were new combinations, things which were extremely abundant and cheap and almost worthless in one place, were full of worth when combined with something else, which was also worthless in another place. They made that happen. They moved between land using sea. And that's what a comprehensivist does. So I thought that that example in the first chapter is one of the best illustrations of what comprehensivist is. And you see that it is a physical and mental, both together. It requires a certain kind of mindset to be open to people whom you're going to find. You don't even know their language and you have to figure out. You don't know whether they are belligerent or not, what their nature is. You have to figure out how to deal with them. And you have to take the risk of the voyage, and you have to figure out what combinations are possible, make them happen, So that I thought is an example of the greatness of Buckminster Fuller, that he can just bring that example as a starting point to show you what this one Earth is and how you can actually think of Earth as a whole, think of civilization as a whole, and act at that level. Sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, and some of those examples in there, I think are absolutely, just really make you think. In a sense, I really like the one he talked about, desalinization. And he talks about, hey, the cost of desalinization and that specifically. And he says, people say, oh, it costs too much. It costs too much. And he's like, no, if you really looked at the pure cost, the total cost of how much we put into water and every other piece of energy, it doesn't cost too much. It really, if you take the whole system into account of how much you're spending on other areas, that how you subsidize water, what is really going into that, maybe desalinization doesn't cost as much as you think. And that's kind of coming back to principles, right? You're coming back to what are the principles that allow you to determine if something is possible. What is possible? It should, or is the system itself dictating what you do? And I think that that's what the beauty of Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth kind of does. It gives you a real kind of blueprint of what the whole is. There was, I think, could you actually name a couple of the top three? Because there was another one I wanted to comment on, and
Please go ahead.
well, but it was the top three that the next three. It was
The next three. Okay, let me see here.
It was out of the next. I forgot which one it was already.
It is Mark Stallman, Polymath Power.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, Dr. Cotalesa. Yeah, the thing is that I thought that some of her meetups were actually some of the best as well, because she actually talked about the behaviors of a polymath and really studied what a polymath is and what makes them tick. And I found that was really one of the more, and she's done extensive work in that area. And she talked about how they balance their time. She talked about how they sometimes they can't stick to one thing, like that that's just not their nature, to be in one kind of domain for too long. And what that did was that brought a lot of what we were talking about here with comprehensivity and made it real, because she actually interviewed the people that are polymaths, that are living comprehensivist lives. And I think that that's an important thing, because sometimes we're here, we're talking about it theoretically, we're seeing how it works theoretically for us, and we're getting exposed and we're stretching our minds and we're seeing about it. But she went out and actually interviewed and talked to people that kind of, it brought the practicality of it, into our consciousness. So I thought that was very good as well.
Wonderful.
And
Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you, Joe. I'm going to list, I'm going to now skip meetups to just show you the range. The next one is Dante, celebrating 700 years, the entire Dante series that we did. The one after that is Why Study Design Way. This is the Design Way series. The next one is on 4 cardinal virtues with John Roth. The next one was discussing Marshall McLuhan's ideas. So Marshall McLuhan, Harold Nelson, The Design Way, Dante, virtues, anything that stands out to anybody, and anybody would like to comment on these. Go ahead if you would like to comment. Otherwise, I'm going to give you the next one. Maritza, go ahead.
I just want to briefly bring up the design way. I feel like the design way was something, it's actually funny. If you guys haven't seen it, there's an interview with CJ. I want to say it's about a year, almost a year
Yep.
now. And it's how Shrikant was introduced to the concept of the book, The Design Way. And, you know, he told us, hey, CJ kept talking about this one book. I thought we were talking about Buckminster Fuller. I'm going to try reading it. You want to read it with me? That's kind of how that started. And, you know, all of us drank the Kool-Aid.
Marisa, let me interrupt to give you the backstory here. So I had actually gone to visit CJ, okay, along with Joe. We were at CJ's house. You know, this was just after COVID. We were one of the first visitors that they had. And the purpose was to interview him on his book that he's writing. And he's made considerable amount of progress. He's covered a lot of the chapters. And we look forward to his book very soon. So he's been working on that. And when he was talking about the book, you know, he kept on holding up this book, this other book. I said, wait a minute, why this book? Why is it? And he held it up 4 times during this interview. I said, what is going on here? So that's why. And then what ended up happening was that I said, okay, I have to see what it is. And so I got it on my Kindle, and I have my Kindle hooked up so it can read to me. And I found that I just drank up the book. You know, I just took that in. I think it like in 3 days or something like that. It's a complex book. So I was reading, and then whenever I sat down, I would start reading. And then whenever I started walking or moving, I kept reading, and I just went on and on until I finished it. And they said, okay, I have to do meetups on that. And it was an amazing thing because CJ posted on his LinkedIn that we were doing these meetups. And I had done an introductory video on the meetups, and he posted that. And Harold Nelson found out about it, the author. And he actually posted it on his website and his LinkedIn. And a whole bunch of people who had been studying Harold Nelson showed up, including one of his close associates, Robert, and also Harold Nelson. So he would come to each and every one of those meetups. And so I said, Harold, do you want to speak? He said, no. I want to watch these people because this is like watching my grandchildren play. Because these are my ideas. I've been working with them for so long, and it's wonderful to see all these people, you know, interfacing with these ideas on their own. So I want to just be there in the background and listen, just like I watch my grandchildren play. So that's what he did. Go ahead, Marisa.
It was an amazing, amazing experience. So I have to say, I had heard of Design Way for at least maybe 2 years. CJ brought it up a lot, but every time CJ brought it up with the Thinking Society, it was like this holy grail that was really too difficult for mere mortal.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt again. So I asked CJ, okay, look, I love this book. I just read the whole thing, and I'm going to do meetups on it. So he said, oh, sure, I'll give you a plan how to do it. You have to do at least 200 meetups on it. I said, 200 meetups? There is no way I can do 200 meetups. It's not humanly possible. It's not humanly manageable. It's just doesn't work. And so I started doing it at a much faster pace. And CJ was very skeptical in the beginning, but it turned out to be amazing. You know, he didn't attend the meetups, but he would watch them.
And he would send us synopses. Exactly. We would get little emails, email love notes about a day or two, a few days after the event, saying, oh, this was great. And Marita, when you pointed out this and Shrikant, this connection you made was mind blowing. It was just great. But yeah, so, right. I had never even thought to buy the book because honestly, when CJ brought it up, and he brought it up often, it was with such reverence and such, this is not something mere mortal could understand, that it just never occurred to me. I was like, you know what? I'm keep letting CJ give me little baby bite-sized pieces from the book, that's gonna have to do. So, but then, you know, CJ, Shrikant was like, I've got the book. Do you want to? I felt like a little kid. It's like, can I? Really? We're gonna disobey CJ? Okay. So, right. And then the rest was kind of history. And it's one of those books that, again, it just seems to fit so many variety of things that it pulls things in. And I find that now we all are a little bit like CJ, and that whatever we're talking about, somehow some concept from the design way ends up being the glue for a concept we're trying to piece together.
Thank you. Thank you, Marisa. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just comment really quickly on the design way as well. I mean, I thought particularly the chapter on judgment, where it talks about design judgment, to be really enlightening, as well as the idea of the ultimate particular, you know, where you start out with your desiderata, and you know, you iterate and you get to your schema and you got your party and this, and then you go from from the real to the ideal. Just that journey, that iterative process that is actually very similar to it's unique. It's not similar to any kind of like agile approach that is used in typical project management styles. It was really genuinely unique on how to make decisions and actually create something that hasn't been created yet, and to come up with a genuine solution to a problem. I think that was one for me, is one of the most important things about the design way, is that it really it allows you to think out of it. If you were to consult somebody, you'd really be consulting to them, and there are, you know, there are situations where the authors do acknowledge, hey, using an idea that already exists is okay, but that's not necessarily, you know, it's don't only think in that way, and how to really think like a designer, as opposed to think about somebody who's just regurgitating something that they've come across, which is what a lot of people do. And so I think that's a really important point. I thought that the Dante Wednesday meetup was actually one of the, I mean, that series was amazing, but because of the detail that of how many things are actually in play with Dante, I felt like I would almost have to pick one thing and read it 100 times in order to really get it, because there's like physics involved, there's religion involved, there is, I mean, religion in the sense that historical religion, you know, the schisms in the church that are involved, and even where you know, they're in hell, and you have Muhammad, you know, he's going through some very painful processes, I'll just say that. But even the great thinkers like you know, Virgil is his guide, and what, you know, and it's or Cato actually, and as being his in his first interaction in purgatory, and why Cato was there, and it doesn't make sense because Cato should be in hell, since, but anyway, but when you get to some of the philosophical discussions, and you started to understand why Dante constructed it the way he did, it's really just an incredible work. It's an incredible work. And the thing that I found to be the most interesting about Dante overall is he was going one direction in life, and he thought this is the way he was going to go, and he totally went and you know what, there was another plan. Beatrice had another plan for him, and so that he was I thought that was the best part. I mean, you know, that you never know where life's journey is going to take you. We all think we actually, you know, have a plan, and that journey was I thought that was one of the best series that we've done here.
Well, Joe, I hate to disagree with you, but we are going to do a meetup on Dante that is going to be better than that. within
I can't wait.
a month, because it's going to be with Phil. See, Phil
Phil
is
knows
a
that.
philologist. Okay, he's a philologist, true to his name, and we're looking at somebody called Eric Orbach,
Yes.
and Eric Orbach is like a founder, is one of the founders of the field of literary criticism. And he has such amazing insights about writing. We just did a meetup on his comparison of Odyssey and the Old Testament. How the Odyssey is, in Odyssey, everything is uniformly illuminated. Everything and every relation is explicit. Even what is happening inside the minds of people is very clearly portrayed in a very concrete way, stands out to you. Whereas Old Testament, very few pieces are used in order to show the meaning and importance of things. Now, the chapter 8 of that book, Mimesis, is on Dante. And Dante is the favorite of Eric Orbach. He had written a whole book on Dante. And what Dante does is that he brings together both these great styles, so different from each other. One which is extremely concrete oriented, which makes the world come alive to you in a very concrete form, and the other which is deeply imaginative. And both these styles are brought together, just like he brings all of the classic thought and all of the medieval Christian thought together into a new integration. He also does that in style. So we're going to be looking at how Dante does that. What is it about his style, and how does he actually do that? So I'm telling you, it's going to be an amazing, amazing meetup. Next up is going to be Judy, followed by Maritza. Judy.
Yes, I just wanted to echo everything that Joe and you, Sherkan, has said about Dante, because I started with Meetup with Dante, with this group, and it hooked me. What Joe said about we all love to learn. I was just immediately attracted to this group because I love to learn. So I just wanted to thank you all. I didn't want to add more to what you have added, and I'm looking forward to doing the Noon, Dante, and Buckminster Fuller, and all the other programs that you're planning to do. And where can we see all the ones that I've missed or that everybody else has missed? Is there any way that we can see all these meetups that you're
Sure.
talking about? I
So
haven't seen
Joe, can you
90% of them.
Yes, we've done about 1,000 meetups, Judy. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Joe, if you could put the link to our video channel and also put the link to the Comprehensivist playlist, those two things. So the video channel, you can see all the meetups. You can just browse through it. That's the video channel.
Okay.
YouTube/C/52 Living Ideas. And then there will be a link for the Comprehensivist meetups.
Okay.
So those two combination will give you all the meetups.
Okay,
So thank you,
Thank
Judy.
for
Really
putting all
appreciate it.
the- Yeah, it's really wonderful. Thank you. You've done a great job. Really, really wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Next up is Maritza.
I wanted to bring one more thing on the design way. The invitation to consider that one should be designing one's life, and that one does not require an architecture degree in order to be a designer of one's life, I feel like it's also one of those things that's so simple and so complicated, and that possibly may not occur to us until we consider it in this format. One of the strongest things actually that I take from the design way is the idea of intentionality. And I took that idea and just ran with it. Like so many of the things I've hosted with you and on your behalf, Shrikant, have been following that thread. We didn't do any of the Mihal Csikszentmihalyi discussions. We didn't do any of them here on Wednesdays, but I felt that that was such a huge part of my comprehensivist learning, in that, you know, I was exploring some like positive psychology, you know, what am I doing in this field? This has nothing to do with anything I've done before, but it was this idea of looking at my consciousness with intention is what led me down that path. And we went, I want to say there's like about 30 videos on 2 books of his exploring that concept. Also, the design way, in some format, I think it's where we have a few of our sessions that have, and they're not all Comprehensivist Wednesday sessions, but they're more action-based. Like I love the more recent improv sessions we've been doing with Mike Amodi, and I think he's gone now, but yeah, we were doing, you know, with him. I love the interactivity of it. And it's this invitation to move with intentionality, to actively seek to improve ourselves, to move forward. You know, I see that in my mind, that's the collaboration aspect of the collaborating for comprehensivity. We're putting mouth to action. And I just think that's beautiful. We're also doing that on Mondays with our Poetry Mondays, you know, because we're not only reading poetry, we're also writing poetry. And so many people, even, you know, Mike Amodi himself was one of the people who at the very first, you know, Poetry Monday was like, I don't know anything about poetry. I found this poetry book in the bargain section and I'm reading the first one my eyes landed upon. And yet he was, sure enough, he was there. He was with us, helping us create a collaborative poem. And to me, all of these little tendrils, again, they come from this concept, this idea of, you know, the breadth and the depth on a variety of subjects. And taking action together here, I really think that that comes from these Wednesdays. You know, what we started here on Wednesdays, it's kind of bleeding into all of our lives, Shrikant.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to say is that the core of comprehensivist work here that we are doing at 52 Living Ideas comes from CJ. So this series, collaborating for comprehensivity, that series is really the heart of everything, because the thing that makes it special is the range of the thought that CJ puts forth. So I'm just going to read out the titles for you to see the range here, okay? And I would love to hear people's comments on it, because for me, CJ got us started on this, okay? He got us started on this path. And not only that, his work, his monthly meetups have been the spine. They have actually tried to map different areas, wide variety of areas, and also provided the integrating principles for this. So I'm just reading it out in the order that I find it here. Shifting perspectives and representing the truth, Islamic Golden Age and Comprehensivism, Buckminster Fuller, Mystique, Comprehensivist Thinking of Buckminster Fuller, Humanity's Great Traditions of Inquiry and Action, the Necessity and Impossibility of Comprehensivism, the Fundamental Role of Stories in Our Life, Value of Ethnosphere, Value of Multiple Working Hypothesis, Inductive Attitude, the Moral Basis of Science and Comprehensivism, Rethinking Change and Evolution, How to Create That Which Is Not Yet, How to Explore the Future and Why, Redressing the Crisis of Ignorance, an interview with CJ, which Maritza was talking about, the whole shebang. What have we learned from the Comprehensivist series? It was a reflection on his meetups. Comprehensive exploration, comprehension, and collaboration, articulating comprehensivity, What is comprehensivist learning? The measurement of life, measuring belief, 16 intellectual virtues of comprehensive practice. So these are some of the meetups that he has done for us. So any comments on CJ's meetups? Go ahead, Joe.
The thing that is amazing about all those meetups that you've just outlined is that CJ has a vision with each and every single one of them. Like, this is not some random list that has been put together. This is a vision of what he has for comprehensivity. And so, like, this is not just when he asked that I do one of the meetups on ignorance, it was part of something else he had in mind. So this is something that it's not only it's very close to him, but if you follow through, if you go through all of CJ's meetups, you start to be able to put bits and pieces together of what he's saying and the overall themes. When he's talking about whether it be I believe he did one on macro comprehensive, micro incisive as well. I mean, so when he's talking about then the problems with induction, or if he's talking about then the multiple working hypothesis, mistake, mystique. Trying to think what else would have been on that list. Just how to arrive at generalized principles. These are all done with the idea of creating something of what he's calling a comprehensivist. And this is essentially institutionalizing Buckminster Fuller's ideas. And I think they're very important, because what happens is what it allows us to do is connect. We talked about how making connections between all our meetups. He's giving us the tools to do those things. And that's what his goal is. And I think that that's perhaps the most important thing, is that I'm trying to just think of one solid example that would string all of his ideas together, but it's really hard on the fly, because it's
I will give an example. CJ is a good example.
He is. Well, he is. He absolutely is. I mean, CJ is the example. I mean, every time I talk to him, he knows where everything where he wants to go with this.
It was interesting whenever I talk to him, it's like he said, okay, I can do this. I have about a 1.5 year meetups planned in front of me. And after that, I don't know, but this next 1.5 years is going to be this 6 months, we're going to do this. And then the next year, you want to do good, maybe 2024 or 2025, because I have all of these other things planned. So it's really incredible, the vision, the systematicness with which he's pursued it. And that is the foundation for the comprehensivist work that we are doing here. So that's, I wanted to just highlight that.
Yeah. No, and that's what I just wanted to basically say, that all of these, he did one on judgment as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very good meetup as well. And that we're just, all of these are just done with very careful planning, and to provide us with tools. And they do, if we dig deep enough, we actually will find tools that will actually allow us to make the connections.
Right. And I want to point out, Maritza has put his website. You will notice that the preparation that CJ does for the meetups
Yeah.
the level like 10 times more than anybody else.
Yeah.
Because you will find there not only fully written up argument, but number of links to lots of resources,
Yes.
videos you can watch, all of it put together. And now all the videos of the meetups too. So it's a great resource, great place to start. All right. So I'm ready to wrap up. And I think Laura has an announcement. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't know how many New Yorkers are here, but there's a place called the Brooklyn Waterfront. It's on Pier 44 in the Hudson River. It was built in 1861 and now houses 25,000 square feet full of art. So anybody who loves to look at art and wants to be overwhelmed by really decent art should go there and take a nice walk. It's going to close up in the wintertime at Thanksgiving and it will reopen in March. I've gotten associated with it, and I think it's a really wonderful environment. I think I finally found a home for myself where I belong, and I'm like I have a few paintings in a second show, and I have one other one, and it's like 100 members, and you get to show, and anybody who does art ought to check it out because it's everybody's welcome, and you can do it, be a member or not. If you're a member, you get to participate in 5 member shows and some other stuff that you work because it's collaborative. So anybody wants to drop by, it's open 1 to 6, Saturday and Sunday only. And if you like home barbecue, Hometown Barbecue is a block away,
Wonderful.
which is one of
Thank
the
you.
best barbecue.
What is it
places
called?
around.
What is it called again? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's Brooklyn Waterfront, and
Brooklyn.
it's called, the group is called the Brooklyn Waterfront Artists Coalition, and
Okay.
but it's at the Brooklyn waterfront and it's literally in the water actually. So it's fun to go. It's on the pier, so it's a really nice environment. It's very panoramic, but the artist, it's like pretty overwhelming to when you look in the door and just see this row of art going like beyond the horizon, so to speak. And then there's an upstairs and, so.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, I'm going to have Joe talk about the new series he's starting this Friday. Joe.
So the new series that we're starting is Ray Dalio's Principles. And these are principles that Ray Dalio has used throughout his life. We're going to be focusing on the ones that he's used to guide his life, not necessarily the part 3 of the book where he gets a little bit more into some of the business aspects of things. But it's a really interesting series because the reason why is that he goes over ideas as to why you need to think both on a macro level and a micro level, but he also as to why you should use principles to guide your life. And one example that I really like is he says, well, if you understand at a macro level things like supply and demand, it says then you can start to infer from there, and you can start to make some, you can start to understand what underpins a market. But you have to understand the principles first that guide, some of these market fluctuations. Now that's just one example that he uses. He uses things like DNA in any way. How we could look at us as humans, how we as humans evolve as well. So it's a I think it's going to be a very, very interesting series. And in the first week we'll be starting with I forget what the actually.
That's fine.
Yeah.
As you find out, let me tell you that in the 52 Living Ideas, we went through this entire book. This part, it has 3 parts. The one that is worth focusing on is principles as is applicable to individual life. So it doesn't have anything to do with business. It doesn't have anything to do with economics. It is all about how do you lead your life using principles. what we did was that we had about 60 people showing up every week going through this book. We actually had a joint notebook that everybody kept notes on all the principles that they were studying so they could talk to each other while they were doing that. And I've, in the first meetup, if, I'm going to actually share what that notebook looks like, because I don't want to give the notebook because there is a lot of people's contribution to it, but I want to just show it to you to see the engagement that you can have. It's a very, very interesting book because it breaks everything into principles. So it says there are 6 categories of principles. In each of the categories, there are these 6 to 8 principles. Each of them is named in a single sentence, and you can evaluate, what you think of it, to what extent you are using it. We did all kinds of exercises and stuff based on it. So it has lots of legs. Okay. And it could be really, really good. So please join us. It's going to be Fridays once a month. We're doing this. So in Fridays, we have a rotating schedule. The first Friday of the month is going to be Joe doing principles. The second Friday, I think it's going to be, what is going to be the second one? I think it's going to be the Divine Feminine by Evanique and Brian. The fourth Friday is going to be a recap of Gita. So we are continuing our work on Gita. And we have another one on the third one, which escapes me at this
design your life.
Yes, Design Your Life. Exactly. That is being led by Jang and Evanique and Joe. And so those are the four Fridays. If there is a fifth Friday, we'll have to figure out what to do with it. Just like we did this for this fifth Wednesday this time. So all right, folks. So thank you so much, and we will see you soon. All right, bye.
So we
Bye.
should have a Christmas party. Should
Bye.
come.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to
Thanks
see you.
all. Take care.
All right. So Joe, I'm going to log off and I'll start it again.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right.
Hey, wait real quick before
Yeah,
you
yeah.
log off.
Go ahead.
Just no, just nothing to do with any of this, just the housekeeping notes. For Monday, Shrikant, I think I forgot.
Oh
to
yes. Yeah. Tell me
you,
what is it
we're,
going?
we're gonna do Pablo Neruda, and we're going to do Harmony because the request was that we do something light after doing Fear.
Right. Harmony.
Harmony,
Okay.
yes.
Can you just email me the name of the author?
Yes, absolutely.
All
I'll
right.
do that. And I'm posting the video now.
Okay. Laura, can I say bye to you? I want to talk to Maritza and
Okay,
Joe
bye.
about things.
Oh, do you want me to stay?
If you want, you can stay.
Sure.
Joe, is it okay if Maritza stays?
Yeah.
Sure. Joe had a conversation with CJ. I also want to update Joe on our conversation. So firstly, let me go ahead and Joe, I talked to Maritza about the same, all the ideas. And so there are a couple of things. Basically, she also agrees with the general thrust of everything that I was thinking, because I wanted to get a reality check from you guys know CJ for a lot longer, and I'm trying to kind of understand what exactly he is trying to do and to actually deliver it. There are two additional things. One point that Maritza made is that he seems to be focused on kind of institutionalization, which is not, which is kind of, it's a difficult concept. But the point that Maritza made was that we can get all the Bucky people that CJ knows to actually do a series on basically get presentation of Bucky's ideas in a very solid way. And it's going to be a piece of cake to do it. So I was thinking of kind of expanding. The simplest way is to just expand the meetups that we are doing on Buckminster Fuller in order to match up with whatever, to whatever extent we want. It's very easy to, for example, double up on CJ's meetups because Mike's series is coming to an end. We can go ahead and add that one. And then maybe we can add a Buckminster Fuller one on one of the weekends, possibly, something like that. And we can get a rotating group of people, all the Bucky folks, to come and present on that. So that
the one thing that was going to be against our favor is that we're entering now into holiday season. People's schedules tend to be very busy.
Sure. I mean, that's okay. I mean, we are planning for the future. So we'll just go around the holidays in some way and we'll figure it out. Okay. Go ahead, CJ. I think Joe talked to CJ. Would you like?
I did. I spoke with him this evening, and we had a long conversation. And we had briefly spoken as well, Shrikant, about this idea of going, not going through the Synergetics board.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, CJ has agreed.
Oh,
so because after talking it through with him, I said, CJ, in my experience, it's best to give somebody something to say no to. If the Synergetics board should want to come along, they're fully invited. The people that are involved in Synergetics, they're more than welcome. But to go through them and to ask them for support would only create a bottleneck, and we don't have time to waste at this particular moment. So and we have limited energy as well. So we really have to focus our energy on getting this off the ground. And he said, yes, I agree.
That's exactly what we were saying the same thing, Joe. That's great.
So
I'm glad.
It was and I said, look, it's not like you're excluded. He says, I don't want to exclude them. I said, you're not excluding them. I said but at the very least, we have to shape this, inform this as well, because then they can decide whether they want to be involved as well. So
Joe, a proposal I would make, and I haven't responded yet to CJ, but I will before I fall asleep because he did ask for me to respond today. I would propose that maybe he hold off on the letter, maybe a day or two, and what I would say is still send a letter if you wish, but send it more as I am doing this things, just as a heads up to you. If you should like to join us for any or all of it, you are cordially invited to do so. I think that's a better letter to send. Like, you can include them from the beginning, but don't do it from the perspective. And it sounds like you're already saying that's already done. So that's great. But so that's
yeah, I mean, no, I think that I don't know how many people this is going to. That's the other thing I'm not sure of yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are on the same page.
That's great.
I think the great thing is that, firstly, CJ is a major figure in this community of Bucky people. Secondly, he knows at least a half a dozen to dozen people who really would love to carry on the work that CJ has done. Maybe they have the same kind of vision as Bucky of saying, you have to bring these ideas to the world. Otherwise, what are you doing? So that's one. Secondly, is that the community as a whole, I think we're going to get support from there too. So kind of going broad and then kind of including the board. Just presenting it to as a fait accompli, of saying, look, I'm doing this, and just having that done, and then offering them stuff as a place. I think that beautiful.
And I am, and the thing is that I think we do need to keep in mind, CJ's bandwidth.
Yes.
Going forward is going to be extremely limited, I think. For at least the coming months.
Yes.
And so we'll go from there.
Okay.
But, so
very good. So firstly, I want to thank both of you for the conversations today. It helped me kind of just made sure that I was thinking along the right track, and each of you added a lot of things which I think are going to be very helpful. So I'll put something, I'm just going to organize my thoughts. I will talk to CJ tomorrow, probably sometime in the morning before 2 o'clock or something like that, based on his schedule. And then I'll try to write things up a little bit, very simply. And then we will go from there. Because I think if we start it right, it's like, this is actually quite exciting, of just saying, okay, let's see how we can scale it. And the thing is that we have so much capability of just doing it, that to just going to an organization asking for permission this doesn't sound right. So
No, and even getting them involved would actually be, it'd
It
be
would-
more bureaucratic,
it
and it
is,
would
yeah,
be, it
and
would
it's going to
just,
kill
A lot of weight, a lot
lot
of
of
weight.
yeah. And I can do like 10 times or 100 times more work, but I cannot. It's difficult for me.
And tag us in. Tag me in. I will make time. This is important.
Yeah.
And I will make this a priority. So if you need something, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm gonna express that to him as well. I agree with you, Joe, that I think his bandwidth, and he may not quite yet understand how his bandwidth will be affected, but I think that it will be nice for him to see that. I think it would be like uplifting to realize, I had to take a pause, but I have enough embers out there that it's still growing. I think that would be really nice for him to see.
Wonderful. All right, folks. Thank you very much. Good night.
yeah, have a good evening.
Have a good night,
Bye.
guys. Bye.